The topic is a little bit provocative. Are you colonized? But it's designed for the purpose. It's meant to ask questions, to raise questions rather. So let me go to the next slide. And so here's the agenda. So we'll look at some institutions to understand what I mean by this. And before we even go to the agenda, so what is a colonial mindset? Let's understand what we are talking about here. So a colonial mindset is a deep-seated inferiority complex. So a master-slave kind of a relationship that you have, that somebody is a person, society, country, etc., have, you feel that you inherently, just by being yourself, you are inferior as compared to somebody else. And in particular, I think we're talking about the colonizer. So everybody understands the European colonization, British colonization, but there were others as well. So I think there is somewhere in the Indian psyche a deep inferiority complex. That's my premise. And that's a marker of a colonial mindset. Just to give a quick example, if you think that everything coming from Europe is superior in quality as compared to, say, what is Indian, then you have, without any reasoning, that is that would be classified as an inferiority complex. Secondly, if somebody is blindly copying this quote unquote master, thinking that this will make you like them, so the blindly copying is the key part here. Taking ideas from other folks is not a colonial mindset. Ideas get exchanged, you adopt something that is better, and collectively everyone improves. That is not colonial mindset. What is colonial is you're blindly doing the copying. You're not making any changes. You're not applying critical analysis. You're not objectively analyzing what is good or bad, but simply because someone else is doing it and you think they're superior, and you just start copying them. That is blindly copying. That's another marker of a colonial mindset. The final and the biggest one is adopting an outsider point of view. When looking at your own systems, methods, institutions, thinking, your vocabulary, everything. So when you look at yourself as if you're looking from an outsider's perspective, then you have truly become colonized. So then you adopt the master's terminology, you adopt their way of thinking, and you completely ignore your own tradition. So that would be the sort of the king of all, slaves, I would say. So yeah, that's sort of the framework of the talk. That's where I'd be sort of sticking colonial mindset. Now let's come to the agenda. So basically it's not possible to cover all sorts of institutions. So I've picked a handful. So we'll look at military and law enforcement as an institution and look at some of these areas where I think these institutions are still colonized. We will look at Indian Constitution and judiciary and do the same. And finally, we'll have a quick look at education as an institution. So schools, universities, colleges, syllabus, et cetera, et cetera. Again, it's not possible to go very deep. These topics are, you can discuss for hours on each one of them. But my idea in this talk is to give you enough of an overarching framework that you can use to further analyze. All right, so second point would be, does it matter? So you might say, kya fark padta hai? Who cares? So that's another sort of quick point. Why does it matter, or does it matter? And if it does matter, what can you do? So how do you make it actionable? ये तो ठीक है, हमने जो भी है इसके बारे में उसमें खामियां निकाली, हमने critical analysis भी कर लिया, but what's next? हम क्या करें उसके बारे में? Should we just wait for somebody else to come and fix it, or fix things, or can I do something? All right, so that's what you can do. I have a very specific recommendation, and then finally we will do the Q&A. Okay, let's dive into it. We have a limited time, so we'll just jump into the topics. So the first one is military and law enforcement as an institution. So again, I am not talking about individuals here. I come from a military family myself. and basically have great respect for this institution. My point is to highlight a few things which represent that colonial mindset in the staying within the topic. Now, military as an institution, I should mention before we get into this, overall has done really well. And they are doing their job. Essentially, the institution was military's job is to defend the country from the outside adversary, and they're doing a phenomenal job. That's my assessment, and you can see that over the if you just think from the independence point onwards, we've had several wars, and they've done really well. However, let's come to the point. So the first point is there is a watertight division between officers and other ranks. And if you are not from the military family, then you probably don't understand what other rank means. But other ranks is an official term given to people who are not classified or not commissioned officers. So, Sipahi and Nayak and all these, all the way up to Subedar Major in the Indian Army, and equivalent in the Indian Air Force, Navy, and the paramilitary forces like BSF, CRPF, there is ITBP, Indo-Tibetan Border Police, etc. So there is a, and this is like today, I'm talking about 2021, there is a clear demarcation between an officer and somebody who's not an officer. There is no mobility or promotion from the other rank to the officer. So it's kind of like a permanent ceiling. If you join as somebody, as a Sipahi or lower rank, you can never become an officer through your entire career. There are some exceptions to it, but there's very, very few. You have to go through a special process. But overall, there is no mobility, no promotions. There are different residences for officers and non-officers, different mess. So mess is a place where you socialize, and it's like a club. Right. So, and then there is a Batman or Sahayak. These are different terms which are used to describe. So there is a system, particularly in the Indian Army, where essentially a soldier who is the full-time soldier of the Indian Army works as a house sort of help in the officer's house. So what the soldier is doing is polishing the officer's boots, cleaning up his brass, helping to walk his dog, taking the officer's children to school and back. So that is what the soldier is doing, and they are known as different terms and different names. So Batman is one term. There is Sahayak, and there is orderly, attendant, etc., etc. But this is like, if you're not familiar with the system, you will be baffled and you'll be shocked to know that this is happening today in 2021. A full-time soldier working as a sort of a cleaning person or some kind of a domestic help in the officer's house. All right, so that's 2021. So this is now let's see why this is a marker of colonialism or colonial thinking. So it's a relic from the British era, from the British East India Company and the British Raj, where white men were officers and Indians were Sipahis, or they used to call it sepoys. So white men are officers, Indians were sepoys. So that was the construct, that was the framework using which the East India Company and later on the Raj, British Raj, ruled over the Indian subcontinent. No Indian soldier could become equal to an English officer in rank, status, and profile. Indians could not eat and live in the same place. So there was, that clear demarcation. This is for white men only, or Europeans, and this is for Black people. So there was that distinction. So even today, you might hear terms like Lord Sahib, the Lord Sahib. So the Lord Sahib is a deformation of Lord Sahib. So they used to be called as lords, these officers of the British East India Company. Now you can see the parallels between what used to be done then and what's happening now. And hopefully you can see the parallels, different residences, different mess, and then this orderly Sahayak system. Just to be fair, though, I would say that the orderly Sahayak system only exists in the Indian Army. It's not there in the Indian Air Force or Navy. It's only with the Indian Army. But still, this is a direct carryover or a hangover from the colonial era. So that's so here you go. Even though, last point is, even though the ranks and organizations are copied from the West, Indian military hasn't changed this dichotomy of between officer and non-officer. It doesn't exist, by the way. It doesn't exist if you think that, hey, it came from England, so वहाँ पे वैसा होता होगा. नहीं होता है वहाँ पे. And because the reason is they came to India to rule over this country, and therefore they only want to treat Indians in this kind of a manner, in this kind of a derogatory manner. It doesn't happen anywhere in the world. It only happens in the colonized part, which is, unfortunately us. So here you go. That's the military example for you. These are the ranks. I mean, the details are not important if you're, but at the top are these what are called commissioned officers, from lieutenant, or as in India they're called lieutenant, all the way to general, and there is a special rank called field marshal beyond that. And at the bottom row, you see the lower ranks, which is called the other ranks in Indian Army. So you start as a sepoy or a sipahi, and you move up, and Lance Naik and Naik, Havaldar, Subedar, etc. So here, what I want to point out, now we clearly know there's no mobility from the bottom to the top. My point is, look at the names. So the terminology. So lieutenant, captain, major, colonel, brigadier, etc. And then niche hai Naik, Havaldar, Subedar, etc. So can you see the distinction between English names versus Indian origin names? So why, the question is, they have been placed at the bottom and English names are at the top. If you look at the definition of Subedar, now Subedar, Havaldar, etc. is, again, it's not Indian. If you're really not Indian, they basically are, again, a relic from the Mughal era. So Nayak maybe is an Indian term, but Sipahi is not Indian, it's Farsi. Subedar, Havaldar is again not Indian, it's Farsi, or it's primarily Farsi, which used to be one of the official languages before the British came into to India. The point I'm making is that the Indian, at that time, there were these Indian terms have been placed below the English terms. Lieutenant is a very junior entry-level officer with zero experience. Subedar, before the British came, was somebody who is like, the equivalent would be a governor. If you look at it from today's perspective, Subedar is supposed to be someone who controls the entire Suba. Suba is like, today you say Delhi Suba. So a state or a province. So the governor of a province would be somebody who would be called a Subedar. But here he has been reduced to someone who is like another rank, even below the lieutenant. So again, just trying to give you the sense of how the colonial mindset works. From the British perspective, when they were ruling India, it makes sense. Like everything Indian is going to be below the youngest, smallest, least experienced British soldier. That makes sense. But why would you carry it over? Why not change it? Why not have, instead of general, like say colonel, you call colonel the Subedar and you call Subedar somebody else? You could do that, but you did not do it. So that's my example of the colonial mindset. Let's move on to the other institution I want to talk about, which is Constitution and Judiciary. If you look at the CRPC, the Criminal Procedure Act, this was enacted after the 1987 First War of Independence, which the British called the Mutiny. And the British Raj was imposed. So the East India Company sort of gave the control over to the direct crown. British Raj was imposed. And these laws, the CRPC, remember, the CRPC was created during that time to make sure that this kind of mutiny does not happen. And there's no interruption to what the British were up to. So that's the origin of CRPC. A similar, IPC is again Indian Penal Code. So if you look at the number of sections, there are about 511 and 484. So total about 1,000 sections, and they're divided into subsections. A vast majority of these are used as is, no change in these CRPCs, and the way the laws are written, the way they are governed and sort of administered, there has been no change. You can imagine the implications of that. already, but I'll point out some examples. So there are some veiled blasphemy and hate speech laws. So hate speech is directly there in our law system, in the legal system. Blasphemy is not directly mentioned, but it's like there's a veiled sort of a smoke and mirrors kind of indirect way of saying that blasphemy is a crime. And these are the sections, if you're curious to dig deeper, 153A, and 295A. 295A is very notorious. It is used, you might have heard things like hurting the religious sentiments. If you say something against anybody, then someone else can actually claim that you hurt my sentiment and go to court, call the police, etc. And they'll quickly, very easily, they can apply 295A on you, put you behind bars for no particular reason. Similarly, there's defamation, IPC 499-500. An example is the judiciary oftentimes would pretty much arbitrarily can accuse anybody of contempt of court in India. And we've seen the examples of that. I'll cover a few examples later. But this contempt of court, this defamation, blasphemy, hate speech, all this was designed so that the British would have any kind of sort of excuse to catch the troublemakers. They want you to be a slave. So remember, that's how you can rule. So to keep you as a slave, they don't want you to raise your voice. They don't want you to be loud. They don't want you to criticize any of these institutions. And hence was the genesis of these laws. So what have we done? We declared ourselves independent in 1947, and we have continued to sort of continued to use these laws, the same laws that were used to keep us as under check. So this is what you can. This is a classic example of a colonial mindset. You basically took the Gora Sahab and you replaced that with a Brown Sahab, copy and paste. And you have done a few more copy and paste. You basically took the crown, the statue of the queen, and replaced it with the Sarnath Stambh. You still are sitting in the same buildings from where they used to rule, the New Delhi, entire Lutyens Delhi, including what you call the Rashtrapati Bhavan today was basically the governor's residence. So all of that, right? So basically there's a copy and paste without applying the brains. And as you can see, these specific laws and sections are largely not changed. Now, Indian judiciary does not recognize Bharat. It does not recognize Bharatiya civilization. So it has no notion that there was a Bharat before 47. According to Indian judiciary, India was born in 1947, which is a ridiculous stance to take by itself. Indian courts today want power without responsibility. So they're not responsible for anything. If you go and say, okay, you pointed out that they would comment on all kinds of things, pollution, and government is not doing its job, or XYZ law is not good. The job of the court, judiciary as defined, is basically to ensure that laws are followed. They are not supposed to comment on laws, why the law is good or bad. That's not the job of the judiciary. That's the job of the legislature, which makes the laws. That's how democracy works. But Indian courts want all the freedom to make all kinds of comments. However, they don't want responsibility. If you go and ask a court, how do you fix certain things? That's not my job. Go to talk to law enforcement, go talk to XYZ. So they want complete freedom from responsibility, but they want all the power. The last point is judiciary is infiltrated by the extreme left today, and it actively works against Bharat, which is shocking. Now, I'll show you some examples and to drive home the point on how judiciary is one. If you compare the institutions, right? So with military versus judiciary, military is pretty good, with just a few exceptions. If you can take care of those, Indian military is a very professional organization, and they do their job. They do have the issues that I pointed out, but by and large, it's a very professional organization. Judiciary, on the other hand, is a complete opposite. They do not do their job. There are cases which are pending for years and years, generations sometimes. Their job is to deliver justice. They don't do that. What they do instead is they do these things that I just showed you. They actively work against Bharat They don't recognize Bharat. They do not want to work for the people. They want to rule over the people, just like the British used to do. So let's look at it from some examples, then it will be even more clear. So here is an example. This is a news article from 2015. Unprecedented. History created as Supreme Court opens at 3:20 a.m. Wow. So why did this happen? When did this happen? So in 1993, just to give you some historical background. So in 1993, there were bomb blasts in Mumbai, where one of the convicts, Yaqub Menon, was actually found guilty and sentenced to death. And subsequently, he had appealed. He had gone to the president asking for mercy petition, etc., etc. He went through all these different layers of courts, High Court, Supreme Court. Everybody had denied him, and he was going to be executed. So at the very last moment, somebody challenged the mercy petition rejected by the president. They went to the Supreme Court. Supreme Court, with all their, they basically woke up and they said, okay, we're going to open at 3:20 and we're going to hear him to give this terrorist a chance to potentially save his life. It didn't happen, but that's not the point. The point is, judiciary is so sensitive to saving a terrorist's life, where they don't care about their own normal citizens who are just trying to have a good life. So here's one great example, in my opinion. And this is unprecedented, never happened before. Suddenly they wake up and they want to be sympathetic to this kind of people. Here are a couple of other examples. You've probably heard about the Sabrimala conflict. So Supreme Court intervenes and they don't recognize your traditions. They do not recognize the Ayyappa deity. So if you don't know about the background, basically Ayyappa is a deity who is celibate in nature. So brahmachari है, जो deity है. तो इसलिए वहाँ पे महिलाओं का जाना, वो tradition है, वहाँ पे महिलाओं का जाना वर्जित है. Supreme Court comes and uses the pretext of gender equality and basically passes a verdict saying, okay, women can now enter the temple, completely disregarding the thousands of years of practice. And remember, this is not Indian system is not designed to discriminate between men and women. There are temples which do not allow men to enter, for example, it's only for women, but they're not going to tell you that. This is one example, one temple where the deity is celibate. Therefore, and that's the reason. So tomorrow you might say, okay, Hanuman ji ke mandir mein shaadiyan kyun nahi hoti? I want to get married in a Hanuman temple. You might come up with some kind of ridiculous statement like that. And Supreme Court will say, yes, ye to contempt of ye to wo hai. Gender inequality ho rahi hai yahan pe. So let's start doing this. So they want to interfere in places where they have no knowledge about, which they do not care about. So that's your Supreme Court. On the left side, on the other hand, so see how they work. Basically, अगर ये सब जगह पे equal तरीके से लागू होता तो हम फिर भी समझ सकते थे. See what happened on the left side. So there was this guy, Wasim Rizvi. I don't know if you followed this news, but this guy said that 26, so the article says 26 verses / surahs. Well, the writer of the article is probably not well versed with the Islamic, it's not called surahs, so it's basically surah is a chapter. So 26 ayats is what the right translation. So ये बोलता है कि कुरान में 26 आयतें ऐसी हैं जिनकी वजह से इंडिया की जो इंटेग्रिटी, सॉवरेनिटी, यूनिटी थ्रेटन हो रही है, खतरे में है, तो उसको कृपया निकालें, उस पर चर्चा करें. So he went to Supreme Court and filed a petition. And what does your Supreme Court do? Supreme Court throws it out saying it's absolutely frivolous. They refuse to even hear the petition. Not just that, they slap a 50,000 rupee fine on that poor fellow, saying, how dare you come and do this? So now you can see the double standards and the bigotry of how the judiciary works in cahoots with the people who are trying to break up this country. So on one side, they do this to Sabrimala Mandir. On the other side, they do this kind of thing, refusing to admit the petition. And the same thing during Sabrimala also happened is, they basically said, okay, if you're allowing women inside temples, how about starting to allow women in the mosques? And they said, no, it's not the topic under the It's not something that I'm hearing about. It's outside of the current topic. ऐसा बोल के reject करके भेज दिया उसको घर. So that's how your judiciary works. Completely colonized, infiltrated. They do not care about your traditions, and they actively work against you. Let's continue. So here's a fancy dress party. So I'm calling it a fancy dress party. So these jokers who are standing outside of Supreme Court, these two are wearing black suits in 45 degrees Celsius temperature as blind copy and paste from the Gora three-piece suit. Now, what kind of person in their right minds would wear this kind of costume and be proud that see how nicely we're copying our masters. The right attire for this weather would be a dhoti, which you get some good air circulation. You would wear a kurta, maybe. That would be smart. But they're not smart. This is not about smartness. It's about trying to please your master by imitating. Now, here is another fellow. You can see from the headphones, it's a recent picture. So this guy is actually, thankfully, not in India. He's a Pakistani judge. But look what he's wearing in his head. This is a horse. It's a wig made from horse hair. They still do that, apparently, continuing that tradition. So again, the same point goes, copying and pasting without applying your brains. What kind of judgment do you think he'll deliver where in this kind of heat, in this weather, sitting there with 3 layers and wearing this on his head? You can imagine what sort of judgments they would deliver. Here's an example from Africa. Look at these poor chaps wearing what kind of things they're wearing and looking like clowns. But they're very proud. They're very proud slaves. And that's what they are. All right, let's come to the final sort of institution I want to talk about, which is the education system. So the current 10+2 system was invented by the British as a replacement to the traditional Gurukul system. What it does is it produces order-taking babus. It's designed to produce clerks, low-level, middle-level people who do not question the system, who just mug things up, usko ratta maar ke seekh lete hain, and then you just vomit that in the exam. That's the system that we are so proud of. It's based on indoctrination. Questioning and thinking for yourself is prohibited. There's a lot of, even in mathematics, in a topic like mathematics, a lot of these axiomatic math has been introduced. You know what are axioms, right? You studied about them. So these are tautologies, like certain things which are defined or assumed to be true. Us pe question nahi ho sakta hai. So certain things like between any two, on a real number line, between any two real numbers, there are infinite other real numbers. So who has seen that? But you cannot question that. It's assumed to be. Certain things are true. So axiomatic thinking has been introduced because it enables indoctrination. So what does our education system teach you? It teaches you that all good things were invented by people with Greek names. It teaches you fake things like India gave the world zero. So this is like, एक ऐसा गाजर है जो इंडिया को दे दिया है कि ठीक है भाई तुमने कुछ किया है, you invented zero, now be happy with that. The fact of the matter is India invented the place number system, what you call the decimal system today. India invented arithmetic. India invented trigonometry, and even there is exceedingly large evidence that is emerging that calculus originated in India. So all sorts of higher mathematics came from here. They stole it, and then they basically gave you this carrot saying, okay, you gave the world zero, now be happy and shut up. And that's what we are teaching to our kids. Our education system tells us that Bharat was primitive and the colonizer was the one that brought knowledge to us. So we should be thankful that the Gora, or before then someone else, came and they gave us knowledge. So we should be thankful. They teach you about wrong history. They teach you that India never invaded anyone, that India was not a country. It was not even a country until British came and made it a country, unified it. That's what they tell you. They tell you about falsehoods, like literacy rate in India was less than 5% in 1870. This was a census done in 1872 after this Lord Macaulay and some of these people who introduced this 10+2 system and English education. They conveniently conducted a literacy which was measured in English language proficiency, and they declared that India's literacy rate is less than 5%. So just to give a level set, you can look it up on Google. In Europe, the literacy rate was less than 10% at that time. However, in India, it was much higher. It was much higher because we had these Gurukul system. There was everybody used to go to school regardless of all these jatis and varnas. Everybody had access to education, which is a lie, which gets told to us that lower caste people were not allowed to study. There is a lie. So this 5% number that you hear is basically based on English proficiency. It is not based, अगर आप उसको local भाषा में कौन कितना साक्षर है ऐसा हिसाब लगाएंगे, it is much higher. So that's your education system. Now to be fair to the system, it does, we have produced some good quality people, engineers, doctors, etc. But overall, that's not my area of interest. So I want to point out places where we are blindly copying and pasting things which are wrong, which need to be improved. And again, it's a colonial mindset because of these points where you're thinking that somebody coming with some Greek name is superior versus someone with an Indian name is inferior. So that's my point. Another example for you is think about what gets taught to your bureaucrats, to people who become IAS officers, to IPS officers, to Indian Foreign Services officers, people who represent your country outside in the consulates. What do they learn? What kind of syllabus? So this is a UPSC main syllabus from 2020. This is साल का ही है. Look at some of these topics. So political theory में क्या पढ़ाते हैं उनको? Meaning, definition, approaches. Theories of the state are pluralist, liberal, neoliberal, Marxist, post-colonial, feminist. What is all this? No Indian understands any of these things. Ye sab copy paste hai. So these are all Western theories, which are basically, we are requiring all of our administrative people, bureaucrats, to learn and mug up all these things. So that they can adopt a Western perspective to look at our own folks. So खुद को देखने के लिए वो गोरे के perspective में जाने के लिए आपको ये सिखाया जा रहा है. And look at the justice. So how is justice to be delivered? It's based with reference to Rawls' theory of justice. Who's Rawl? I don't know who's Rawl. So India, we had our traditional systems as well. Now one key point is not to stick to the old traditions. That's not the point. The point is to critically evaluate and figure out for yourself what is good and bad, and then adopt what is good. What is bad, you throw it away. Whether it's your own or somebody else's, it doesn't matter. But you don't blindly accept things. So wo critical analysis, that's the main point I want to make, which is missing. All right, so it talks about rights, meaning of theories, concept of human rights. So there's a lot of things about rights. But in dharma, it's not just rights. Rights here, duty bhi aati hai. So there is nowhere in this thing where duties are mentioned. It's all about human rights. It's about who is oppressing who are the subaltern studies, kaun kisko daba raha hai, creating fault lines between the society. And that's exactly how the outsiders will look at you. That's what your bureaucrats are being taught. Look at these political ideologies: Marxism, liberalism, fascism, Gandhism, feminism, and socialism. So Gandhism ko chhod ke baaki sab to foreign hi hai. Or Gandhism is also kind of not entirely Indian. It's a mishmash of some certain ideologies. So just to give you a perspective of what your bureaucrats are learning, what kind of mindset they have when they become these administrative officers, police officers, foreign services officers, कैसे वो आपको represent करते हैं, उनका दृष्टिकोण क्या होता है. So it's a good example. All right, so now we've looked at the institutions. I want to give you another flavor by personalizing it and think about yourself. क्या आपको लगता है कि आप हिंदी, तमिल, बांग्ला कोई भी भारतीय भाषा बोलने पर आपको गंवार समझा जाता है? अब मैं आपसे बात कर रहा हूँ. Why am I talking in English? So this is like, you have to be able to do self-reflection. So the very fact कि मैं अंग्रेजी में बोल रहा हूँ, this is a sign of colonization. We are all colonized collectively. Otherwise, why should I be using a foreign language to talk to you? So here we go. So again, the question is, what language do you use for business, education, writing, expressing complex ideas? And the answer by and large would be, if you're quote unquote educated, anywhere, or it is English. It is a foreign language. That's a fact. Now, next question. These are the questions that you should be asking yourself. We should be asking as a society, as a country. We should be raising these questions, and then that will lead us in the right direction. So Here's another question for you. What is today's date? So today's date is whatever date it is, right? 2021 is a year. So what is 2021? So I would again recommend you to watch a YouTube video by Dr. Professor C.K. Raju, and it's called The Tale of Two Calendars. He beautifully explains how the calendars that we are using today is actually not a secular calendar; it's a Christian calendar. So BC stands for before Christ. If you ask more questions, what is Christ? Christ is not the last name of Jesus. Christ is somebody who saves. Now, saves from what? Saves from the sin. Sin kya hota hai? So it all ties you back to the cosmology of Christianity. So that's what the calendar is. That's what you use. That's what you're forced to write in your passport. My birth dates with reference to this particular birth of a certain figure called Jesus. उसके रेफरेंस में ही आप आपका रोज का काम करते हो. जब स्कूल का फॉर्म भरते हो, you write the date based on that reference point. Why have we adopted that reference point? Why have we adopted uh, Jesus Samvat? So it really is Jesus Samvat. So what is the reason for adopting that? There is no good reason. Is it that this calendar is better? It is not better. If you do critical analysis, this calendar called Julian calendar, more recently Gregorian calendar, which is another latest update. So Gregorian calendar is not necessarily better than the Indian Panchang, but that's what we have adopted. Now let's look at what is so BC jo hai, before Christ. Some people raised the voice, and you know what they did? So now BC it's not called BC anymore. So it's called BCE. So you guys may not have paid attention to the detail there, but what is BCE? So before Christ becomes before common era, BCE. तो आपने उसका एक और गाजर दे दिया आपको कि ठीक है, चुप रहो अभी, don't ask questions. Here you go. We change the Christ to BCE, before common era, and you be happy with it. Without changing anything, the reference point is still the same. Only the name has been changed to common era. There's nothing common there, right? Common kya hai? It's still based on the reference point, birth of Jesus. There's nothing, it's tied to a particular religion, particular ideology. How can it be common? It's not universal. So what is AD? AD is Anno Domini. Anno Domini का क्या मतलब होता है? You should be asking questions. Anno Domini means in the year of the Lord. अब ये Lord कौन है? किसका Lord है ये? Nobody asks these questions. So they're again referring to Jesus. So that's the calendar. The point I'm making is the calendar systems has been a copy paste. It didn't need to be a copy paste. And if it was, at least you should move the reference point to be something that's more neutral if you're going to make it a global universal thing. All right, so this is a topic in itself, and we don't have time to go into detail, but I just want to give you things that you can poke around with. So another thing is, what longitude are you currently at? Do you know what longitude you are at? So this longitude is called prime meridian, which we use, you probably heard about UTC, the time zone. So UTC यहाँ से शुरू होता है. This is a line that passes through Greenwich in the UK. Now you might say इसमें तो क्या हो गया? What's special about this? तो special ये है कि longitudes are arbitrary. Now you know that the dateline, the international dateline, is passes through the Pacific Ocean in such a way, it's not a straight line, it goes zigzag, and it does it because so that it doesn't go over a single country, so that एक जगह पे फिर आधे देश में जैसे आज जो भी 30 तारीख 31 तारीख है, तो दूसरे part of the country में कुछ दूसरा date हो जाएगा, right? The date will shift. So because of that, they made it zigzag. So that makes sense. That's scientific, the international dateline. But this prime meridian logic is not scientific. It is arbitrary. This line, just a few hundred years ago, it used to pass through Ujjain. I don't know if you guys know that, but the prime meridian, Indians came up with the idea of a prime meridian. It used to go through Ujjain. This was hijacked and taken to UK, and now it passes through Greenwich, which you call the UTC. So prime meridian has been shifted for no scientific reason. It's just arbitrary because Gora wants to be superior. So he doesn't like that it goes through Ujjain, through India. It has to go through their own country. That's why this was moved. Here's another picture for you. Who knows what this place is? Anybody can answer. Anyone?
Maybe
So
it is the place where Nalanda University exists.
Correct. Yes. So this is a place in Bihar today. वेयर यू हैव, जहाँ पे नालंदा यूनिवर्सिटी थी, और उसका नाम ये है बख्तियारपुर जंक्शन है। अब आपने ये अपने प्रश्न पूछा कि बख्तियार कौन है भाई, किसके नाम पे बख्तियारपुर है? So this is Bakhtiar Khilji. Who is Bakhtiar Khilji? The one who burnt Nalanda University. तो आप उसके नाम पे स्टेशन बना के बैठे हैं, उसके नाम पे आपने उस जगह का नाम ही आपने बख्तियारपुर कर दिया है, बिना सोचे, बिना समझे, बिना दिमाग लगाए हुए. So you are actually working, your state is actually working against you by glorifying Bakhtiar Khilji rather than glorifying Nalanda. This station can easily be called Nalanda. Why is it has to be called Bakhtiarpur? Just to give an example, another example of the colonial mindset. Coming to languages, this is a huge topic. I just want to give you some quick snippets. How do you spell your name in Sanskritam versus English? So look at first name, Ritik. So there's only one way to write Ritik. And once you do that, everybody in India can read this, can pronounce it in the same consistent way. If you try to write Ritik in English, there are so many variations on the right. You can see, उसको कई तरीके से लिखा जा सकता है. And why, the reason why that is the case is because the English grammar is weak. It is not precise. Sanskrit grammar, on the other hand, is super precise. So there's only one way to write, there's only one way to say it. मेरा खुद का नाम जो last name है, it's supposed to be written like this, Pawar. It gets butchered, and my cousin writes P-A-W-A-R, I write P-A-N-W-A-R, some people other write P-O-N-W-A-R. All of them are wrong. खुद इंडिया के अंदर ही, when I go to different states, people don't know how to say Pawar, they would say Panwar, Panwar, whatever it is. The point I'm making is कि ऐसा इसको इंट्रोड्यूस करने की वजह से, इंग्लिश लैंग्वेज इंट्रोड्यूस करने की वजह से आपने क्या पाया और क्या खोया? So you're losing your own, you're not able to talk to each other anymore in a meaningful way. You think English is becoming a link language, but actually you're losing the ability to even write or read your own names. Some more examples like put versus cut. So why is PUT put and CUT is not kut but cut? Again, it goes back to the roots. Ki wo language, grammar hai, it's very weak. It's not designed to, it's not as rigorous as Sanskrit grammar is. So if Sanskrit was superior, why did you give up Sanskrit? And why did you pick up English? We don't know. So we are all colonized, just as a point I'm trying to make. The last thing is this word. Who knows how to spell this, how to say this word? D-E-U-T-S-C-H-E. Do you know how to pronounce it? Yeah, so it's a German word, and it's in English, it is impossible to come up with the correct way to say it. So in America, they say Deutsche, एक bank है, Deutsche Bank करके. So in the English speaking world, they call it Deutsche. If you talk to a German, it's not pronounced that way. If you go to India, who has not heard of this bank, they will not be, I guarantee you, कि जिसने पहले नहीं सुना होगा, they will not be able to, उसका उच्चारण नहीं कर पाएगा. If you take the same word and write this in Sanskrit, everybody on the planet can read it and say it in a consistent way. So just to giving you a practical example of how so language is a complex topic, but grammar is one aspect of it. There are other aspects, but I'm just highlighting this one very important aspect of having a rigorous grammar and the derivation rules. That's the reason why when you look at the computer models, you have the LR parsers, etc. You've learned about this in those of you who are from computer science background. You can relate to it by saying that, by thinking that as in the computer language grammar, the production rules from one syllable to variable to sentence to structure, loop, etc., they're very well defined. Similarly, Sanskrit is very similar, and that's the reason why it is more suitable for adoption for all kinds of applications today, like AI and basically language parsing, written or verbal language parsing. All right, so just going through this a little bit faster. Why does all this matter? क्या फर्क पड़ता है, right? So फर्क इसलिए पड़ता है because no civilization is great because they copied somebody else. Look at China, Japan, Iran, and there's a long list of countries that I didn't name here. If you just give the adhikar to somebody else, if you think that someone else will do justice for you, it's not going to happen. It has never happened. You have to take control. So taking control means thinking critically and not copying anybody else just because it comes from elsewhere. Scientific principle says pick what is superior and what is true, not what is in fashion. There are some examples in the world that you can see. These are the countries where they demonstrate that Bharat as a entity, as a civilization, will cease to exist in the next few decades, except as some kind of a poor imitation of the West. So the idea of Bharat will be gone. And here are some examples for you. The Americas. अमेरिका में जितने भी देश आपको समझ में आते हैं, नॉर्थ अमेरिका, साउथ अमेरिका हो, Brazil is basically Portuguese. Rest of the South American countries, Chile, Puerto Rico, Ecuador, El Salvador, जितने भी हैं, all of them उनकी official language Spanish है. Spain कहाँ पे है? Spain is in Europe. Why do they speak Spanish? I mean, you know all the history of Spanish conquests. So their entire culture has been wiped out and replaced by some poor copying of the European ideas. So they speak Spanish. Brazil speaks Portuguese, and you know where Portugal is, again in Europe. So India is headed in the same direction. We are in the early stages. Americas are in the later stages. Philippines is another country which was invaded or conquered. Now they are proud slaves of the West, even though they have their own language called Tagalog, but they're completely they have adopted the Western outlook, Western culture, and so on. That has not improved their lot. They're still a very poor country. Africa is all we already know. It's being divided up into, earlier it was just Western colonization. Now there is a lot of Islamic colonization also. So same thing is happening around us. You just have to open your eyes and look and understand. Be willing to ask questions. तो वही भारत के साथ आज हो रहा है. And in the if this continues, it's a no-brainer that Bharat is going to become like one of these places. Coming to my last thing, what can you do? So my message to people today is apply critical thinking. So I'm not asking you to throw away things that you already have. Just don't accept things blindly. Apply critical thinking, logical thinking, evaluate what is good, what is bad, and then adopt what is good. किसी और का भी अच्छी चीज है उसको adopt कर लो. But just don't throw things away just because it's your own. And Sanskritam Patham. So उसको पढ़ो, संस्कृत पढ़ो, सीखो. That will open up a lot of doors. It's just a door. The language is a door, which basically will take you to a different world. There is a lot of treasure hidden behind that, which only opens if you're willing to sort of search. So that's my two very specific recommendations on anybody can